Have you ever stopped to think that maybe the most powerful way to act isn't about, pushing harder, but maybe it's something more subtle, almost like stepping back? Or have you considered how we might find some real peace in this, let's face it, pretty chaotic world? Could it come from understanding some kind of fundamental flow of the universe instead of constantly trying to impose order? Well, today we're taking a deep dive into exactly those kinds of profound, sometimes counterintuitive questions. We're exploring the world of Taoism and its, well, pretty elusive founder, Laozi. And this isn't just some dusty philosophy lesson, no. It's really an exploration of an ancient Chinese wisdom that offers a radically different perspective on life, maybe even how we govern ourselves and our place in the whole cosmic picture. So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We want to unpack the core ideas of Taoism. We'll look into its somewhat mysterious historical roots, try to shed some light on Laozi himself, and really get into the teachings in the Tao Te Ching. The aim, like always in these deep dives, is to pull out those key nuggets of knowledge, those aha moments, give you a solid shortcut to understanding this fascinating philosophy.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're grounding ourselves in excerpts from Taoism Velauzi, Taisel Philosophie Kukenler. So the insights we're sharing, they come directly from that scholarly work. We're going right to the source.
Okay, perfect. Let's start unpacking this right at the beginning then. Where did Taoist thought actually emerge? We need to talk about the historical setting. We're looking at the Eastern Zhou period, right?
Yeah.
A really long stretch of time, 770 to 256 BC. And it's known in Chinese history as the Great Teachings Era, or the 100 Schools of Thought. Just that name, 100 Schools, it tells you something pretty significant was going on, doesn't it? Like an explosion of different ideas.
It absolutely does. And understanding why that particular time was so fertile for new philosophies is, well, it's key to getting Taoism. Our sources really highlight that during this Eastern Zhou period, China was going through huge changes. Social, political, cultural upheaval. The central Zhou authority, it was weakening quite a bit. This led to power fragmenting, lots of political instability. You've heard of the Warring States period. That's part of this era. Constant conflict, social unrest. It was a messy time.
Right, so the old certainties were kind of crumbling. Traditions were being questioned. People were living with this background hum of uncertainty. It sounds less like a stable empire and more like a philosophical free-for-all where everyone's trying to figure out a new way forward.
That's a good way to put it. This instability, it wasn't just chaos for chaos's sake. It created a sort of intellectual vacuum. When the old order starts breaking down, people naturally start asking fundamental questions. How should we live now? What makes for good government when everything's fractured? What's our purpose if the universe seems, well, kind of indifferent? This environment really pushed thinkers to develop completely new ideas about humanity, society, the universe itself.
And that turbulent background is so important for understanding Taoism's specific character, right? Because unlike some other schools that were trying to, say, rebuild order with strict rules or hierarchies, Taoism seemed to offer something almost countercultural, like an antidote to the chaos.
Exactly. It wasn't about imposing more structure, but maybe something else entirely, almost like letting go of structure in a way. While you had contemporaries like, say, the Confucians, trying to reestablish order through clear roles, moral codes, active governing, Taoism suggested a fundamentally different path. It seemed to swim against the current of, typical human striving. It questioned the whole idea that we needed more control, suggesting that maybe trying too hard to impose order could actually create more disorder.
It's a powerful reminder, really. Periods of massive disruption, however difficult, often spark these incredible intellectual shifts. You see it throughout history, right? Like the Renaissance after the Black Death, or major social movements born from injustice. Maybe, for you listening, think about times when things falling apart actually led to something new and transformative emerging. It makes you think about how creativity can come from uncertainty. Okay, so out of this sort of philosophical melting pot comes the traditional founder of Taoism, Laozi. And I say comes carefully, because, well, he's a pretty enigmatic figure, shrouded in mystery.
That's absolutely right. Our sources are clear on this. While he's traditionally seen as the founder, his actual historical existence isn't definitively proven. He's more like a legendary figure whose wisdom kind of transcends needing a detailed biography. Most of what we think we know about him comes from texts compiled much, much later, specifically during the Han Dynasty. That's 206 BC to 220 AD. That was when many Taoist classics were written down and codified. By then, the legends around Laozi were already well established.
So it's almost like the historical person, if there was one, is less important than the legend and the wisdom attributed to him. The figure crystallized centuries later. But even if the history is murky, the stories about him are really telling, like those famous legends about Laozi meeting Confucius, where Laozi supposedly gives advice to the younger philosopher.
Right, and what's fascinating about those stories, whether they happened exactly like that or not, is what they suggest. They hint at this very early, direct engagement between two of China's biggest philosophical streams, right from the start. It implies this ongoing dialogue, or maybe a contrast in viewpoints, between these two paths to wisdom. You had Confucianism focusing on society, on rules, hierarchy, actively shaping behavior.
Just trying to fix things through human effort.
Exactly. And then Taoism, as we'll see, points towards something more natural, more fluid, less interventionist, suggesting real harmony comes from aligning with how the universe already works spontaneously.
It sets up this amazing dynamic. Confucius, building structures, focused on human action, defined roles, and Laozi gently suggesting maybe wisdom lies elsewhere. Maybe in letting go, in not doing certain things, in a kind of effortless understanding. These stories really frame the philosophical landscape. And from this legendary figure, Laozi, we get one of the most profound texts ever written, the Tao Te Ching.
Yes, the Tao Te Ching, attributed to Laozi, is just a masterpiece. Our sources describe it as dense, yes, but also poetic, incredibly profound, and it's short, just 81 brief chapters.
81 chapters. That's astonishing for a text with such huge influence over millennia. It's not some long, systematic argument. It's more like distilled insights, almost like little poems or puzzles designed to make you think.
Precisely. Its importance really can't be overstated. It's the absolute foundation for Taoism, both the philosophy and later the religion, but it's also revered way beyond that, deeply influencing Chinese culture, art, governance, medicine, and global philosophy too. Its brevity and its poetic, often paradoxical nature mean it can be interpreted in many ways, applied differently across time.
No.
That's a big part of why it still speaks to people so powerfully today.
It's like a concentrated essence of wisdom, isn't it? Seems simple on the surface, maybe, but holds an entire worldview. Makes you wonder, what kind of earth-shattering insights are packed into those 81 short passages? The answer seems to lie in understanding things in a different way beyond just words. Okay, so we've got the historical backdrop, this turbulent time, and the mysterious Laozi. Now let's really dive into the core concepts, starting with the big one, the Tao itself.
The Tao, yes. Often translated as way, path, maybe being. And those are okay starting points, but honestly, they barely scratch the surface of what it means in Laozi's work. Our sources really stress this. In the Tao Te Ching, Tao is so much more than just a physical path you walk. It's not a method, not a strict moral code, not even a belief system you follow step by step. It's more fundamental. It's like the inherent pattern of reality itself.
So it's not telling you how to be, but describing how things are. Something vast, fundamental, the source of everything, but also beyond everything.
Exactly. Tao is presented as the essential principle of the entire universe, the ultimate source of all existence, the unmanifest potential from which everything emerges. But it's also this constantly changing infinite force that's in everything immanent and also outside everything transcendent. It's the ground of being, the pattern governing nature, the flow that harmonizes opposites, sometimes called the uncarved block, pure potential.
And here's where it gets really mind-bending, because Laozi also says this fundamental thing, the Tao. You can't actually define it. You can't capture it in words, which seems paradoxical for a philosophy text.
It's the central paradox, and the very first line of the Tao Te Ching nails it. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. That's not just poetry. It's a deep philosophical point about the limits of our language, our intellect. Words categorize, they define, they try to pin reality down into neat boxes. But the Tao, it's infinite, always changing. It just can't be confined like that. Any definition falls short.
So if words fail, how do we understand it? Is it just some mystical thing beyond us, or is there another way to get it?
Well, this points directly to the Taoist idea that understanding the Tao isn't purely intellectual. It's not about analysis. It requires a different kind of knowing. It's about direct experience, intuition, a kind of felt sense that goes beyond words. You don't know the Tao like you know a fact. You experience it. You align with it. You embody its principles. It's about being in the flow, not dissecting the flow intellectually. It challenges our usual word-based way of processing everything.
That's a huge challenge. Makes you think about things in your own life that words don't quite capture, right? Like love or beauty or maybe just the feel of a place. Is there a deeper truth there that we only grasp through experience, through being present? Taoism seems to invite that kind of knowing.
It absolutely does. And flowing right out of the Tao is the concept of Tad. If Tao is the universal principle, Ta is kind of how it shows up.
Okay, Te. The source is translated as virtue, power, or quality. How does that link to the indefinable Tao? Is Te the practical expression of the Tao?
You could definitely say that. Think of Te as the Tao manifesting within something specific, a person, an action, a thing. It represents virtuous conduct, but not like a rigid moral checklist. It's more the inherent power or quality that arises naturally when something is living in harmony with the Tao. If Tao is the cosmic blueprint, Te is the integrity of that blueprint shining through in a particular instance. It's the potency, the virtue, that comes from being aligned with the way.
Got it. So Tao is the big picture, the universal law, the cosmic order, the fundamental way, and tech is the individual expression of that order, the personal power or virtue you get from being in tune with the way.
Exactly. Our source material spells out that distinction. Tao is the universal law. Tao is the individual power and virtue that comes from alignment with that law. It's the natural expression of the Tao within you, allowing you to act effectively and gracefully, not by forcing it, but through an innate kind of wisdom. And this is really where the philosophy becomes practical. It asks us, how do we embody these huge universal principles in our own lives? How do we actually live the Tao?
Which leads us to how Laozi saw the universe itself, based on unity, right?
Which is quite different from a lot of Western thought that often emphasizes duality.
Yes, that's a really significant difference. We often tend to think in opposites, good versus evil, mind versus body, spirit versus matter, light versus dark, often seeing them in conflict or fundamentally separate. Taoism sees it very differently.
How so? Our sources say Tao embraces both is and is not. A paradox right there. It is. At its core, it holds contradictions. And central to this Taoist view is the unity and the complementarity of opposites. Light and dark, female and male, hot and cold, active and passive. These aren't seen as enemies locked in a battle. They're interdependent aspects of one single reality. They flow into each other, define each other, constantly transform. You can't have one without the other.
So not a fight, but more like a dance, where each side gives meaning to the other. The classic yin-yang symbol springs right to mind. That perfectly shows this idea, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Complementary opposites always moving, each holding a bit of the other.
It's the perfect visual, and our source material explicitly connects this concept to the yin-yang symbol. It beautifully captures that idea. Within darkness, there's a seed of light. Within passivity, a seed of action. They're always in dynamic balance, interdependent, always changing. It's a powerful symbol of non-dualistic thinking. And from this understanding of unity and balance comes a core guideline for us humans. Since everything in the universe naturally follows the Tao's flow, we, as part of nature, shouldn't fight against it. We aren't separate masters of nature, we're embedded in it.
That's a massive philosophical jump from our usual impulse to control nature, or even just control situations, impose our will. The Taoist view is that problems, personal or societal, pop up precisely when we humans try to go against that natural rhythm. When we force things, try to control outcomes based on our limited view, instead of flowing with the Tao's inherent intelligence.
Right. It encourages us to reflect on how seeing unity in what looks like opposites can really shift our perspective, moving beyond rigid either or thinking to something more holistic, more fluid. It's about finding balance within paradox, not choosing sides, and recognizing that real harmony comes from allowing, not forcing. This insight feels incredibly relevant for navigating complex modern issues.
Okay, so if Tao is the way, and Tao is living in harmony with it, then how do we do that? This brings us to maybe the most famous and definitely the most misunderstood Taoist principle, Wu Wei.
Ah, yes, Wu Wei.
Yeah.
Definitely one of the most distinctive ideas in Taoism. Often translated as non-doing, non-action, non-intervention, or maybe action without forcing. But, and this is crucial, we have to get past a common misconception right away. Wu Wei is not about being passive or lazy or literally doing nothing at all. That completely misses the point and strips away its power.
Right, because non-doing sounds exactly like just sitting there, doing nothing.
Yeah.
But you're saying it's actually something active, something strategic even.
Absolutely. The real meaning of Wu Wei is about acting without resisting the natural flow, the universal order. It's about doing things without unnecessary effort, without forcing outcomes, allowing actions to arise spontaneously, naturally. Think about water flowing around a rock. The water doesn't try to smash the rock. It just finds the path of least resistance, changes shape, and keeps going. It achieves its aim effortlessly. Or think of a master artisan. Their tools seems to move on its own. Or a great musician improvising, they're acting, but it flows naturally within the music structure.
That water image is really potent. It totally challenges our usual ideas about productivity and control, doesn't it? We're taught. Exert effort, push, dominate, make it happen. Wu Wei suggests the most effective action might be through non-intervention, through aligning with the situation's energy. That's radical for our kind of hustle culture world.
It is. It's about knowing when to act, yes, but also, just as importantly, knowing when not to act, not from laziness, but from wisdom. The action that comes from Wu Wei is effective precisely because it's in sync with the natural order. It's working with the grain, not against it, like adjusting your sails to catch the wind instead of rowing madly against the current.
So how does this work in daily life? How do you practice Wu Wei when everything around you screams, do more, achieve more?
Well, when you apply Wu Wei personally, it encourages a big shift. Our sources say it's about letting go of things like excessive ambition, grasping desires, and especially that constant need to control every single outcome. Think about how much of our stress comes from trying to force things, from striving for stuff we don't need, or
Right.
micromanaging everything, instead of trusting the process or the natural unfolding.
So it's about giving up the illusion that we can control everything, trusting that if we allow things to unfold, maybe a more harmonious result emerges than if we just keep pushing and grabbing.
Exactly. The result is meant to be a more harmonious, balanced life, lived in sync with nature, both the world around you and your own inner nature. It's finding an inner peace that comes from realizing you're part of this bigger flow. Sometimes the best way forward is to stop struggling against reality and just allow things to happen through effortless presence. Become a clear channel, not a dam. It allows for real spontaneity, like an athlete in the zone.
And this wasn't just for individuals, right? Laozi applied Wu Wei to leadership, to society, which sounds incredibly radical for governing, especially back in that warring period.
It is radical, and it's central to Taoist political thinking. Laozi believed that if you govern with Wu Wei, things find their natural balance without needing heavy-handed control. The ideal ruler, in this view, is almost invisible. They respect people's natural needs, avoid pressure, avoid coercion, avoid excessive laws.
So the ruler isn't constantly dictating, micromanaging, showing off their power. That's a huge departure from how we usually think about leadership, ancient or modern. We expect leaders to be active, making rules, intervening.
A very stark departure. The idea is that if a ruler governs with Wu Wei, society naturally settles into order, because people's natural tendencies aren't being constantly suppressed or twisted by force or too many rules. The ruler creates the conditions for harmony to emerge, rather than trying to impose it. Subtle guidance, not overt control.
That really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if leadership was more about guiding a system towards its natural balance, trusting people's inherent capacity for good, rather than constant top-down dictation? Could our complex web of laws sometimes create more resistance than they solve?
It's a challenging thought. It asks us to reconsider a lot of modern assumptions about managing societies and maybe consider the potential upsides of allowing things to unfold more naturally.
Okay, beyond these huge core concepts like Tao, Te, and Wu Wei, the Tao Te Ching is just packed with other timeless wisdom. Let's touch on a few more key themes that really stand out, starting with this idea of naturalness, Ziran.
Right, Ziran, naturalness, it's fundamental, very closely linked to Wu Wei. Our sources explain it as the principle that everything should exist spontaneously, just as it naturally is, without artificial interference or forcing. It's about authenticity, living without pretense, allowing things to just be.
So not just about nature like trees and rivers, but about human behavior too. Like we shouldn't force ourselves into roles that aren't natural for us, or build overly complicated artificial systems in society.
Exactly. True harmony comes from letting things be what they are, not trying to mold them into some artificial ideal. This applies to how we behave, our relationships, how societies are set up. When we go against our own nature, or when societies create structures that clash with the human spirit, that's where imbalance, stress, and suffering creep in. It's finding freedom in being simple and authentic.
It makes you look around at our modern world. So much seems built on artificiality, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Schedules, social media, even how we structure things. What could we gain by trying to reconnect with a sense of Ziran, of naturalness? It's a very grounding idea.
It really is. And flowing right out of that, almost required by it, is the Taoist focus on humility and simplicity.
Ah, yeah. Two things that seem almost rebellious in our world, which often prizes ambition, being seen, accumulating more and more.
Definitely. Taoism strongly advises against selfishness, against feeling superior. It encourages letting go of the desire for power, status, external approval. This isn't about being weak, it's about understanding that real strength and contentment don't come from those external things, which are temporary anyway. They come from inner balance, from being aligned with the Tao.
And simplicity, that feels like the antidote to the endless chase for more, for complexity, for just stuff.
Precisely. The Tao Te Ching warns that complicated ambitions and excessive desires corrupt us individually and as a society. The preference is for a simple life, simple thoughts. Finding contentment in what's essential, right here, right now, instead of being driven by endless external wants, which Taoism sees as a source of constant dissatisfaction. It's about clearing away the clutter to see what truly matters.
In a world rewarding complexity and accumulation, what's the power in humility and simplicity? What does this mean for our values? Maybe real richness isn't about having more, but about needing less, about cultivating a quiet inner life. That's a big challenge to how many of us live.
And speaking of letting go, finding strength in what seems weak, we absolutely have to talk about the strength of softness, especially through that incredibly powerful water metaphor in the Tao Te Ching.
Yes, water is just everywhere in Taoist writings, isn't it? It seems like Laozi's favorite example for everything. The Tao flows like water. The wise person is like water.
It's the perfect metaphor because it embodies so many Taoist principles. Water is used constantly to show softness and flexibility. On the surface, yeah, water seems weak, soft. It yields, takes the shape of whatever contains it, flows to the lowest point, seems passive. But that apparent weakness, that's its incredible strength, its paradoxical power.
Right, because it overcomes everything in the end. It can wear down mountains, see through tiny cracks, adapt instantly, and it always survives, always persists. It doesn't fight head on, it just adapts, yields, and eventually wins through persistence.
That's the core of it. Our sources emphasize this. Despite its softness, water overcomes obstacles through persistence and adaptability. It always finds a way. It teaches us resilience, adaptability, the power of yielding instead of confronting with rigid force. Finding solutions through flexibility, not brute strength. Being fluid.
How could we apply that water wisdom in our lives? When we hit a wall, face a rigid system. Maybe the Taoist approach is to be like water. Flow around it, find the path of least resistance, wear it down gently over time. It's a totally different way of solving problems, from confrontation to subtle transformation.
It really is. And this loops back perfectly to governance, because Taoism has this very specific, very provocative vision for leadership through non-intervention.
And remembering that context the warring states, constant conflict. It makes sense they'd critique the usual aggressive, controlling styles of rule. That world was a direct result of that kind of leadership.
Exactly. The Tao Te Ching is a direct critique of that excessive centralization, those oppressive policies that Laozi saw causing endless war and suffering. So, it proposed a radically different vision for an ideal ruler. According to Laozi, a good ruler should be almost invisible, minimal interference. They need to understand people's natural needs, and this is key, not coerce them into things.
An invisible ruler. That's quite a thought. Not someone constantly projecting power, making laws, building monuments, but someone who subtly guides the whole system towards its natural balance. How does that work practically? Wouldn't lack of strong intervention just lead to chaos?
Well, that's the typical counter-argument, right? But Taoism believes the opposite. The Tao Te Ching argues that complex laws, harsh punishments, excessive regulations, they actually corrupt society, not improve it. They create more problems by messing with people's natural inclination towards harmony. Simplicity and modesty should be the guiding principles in government. The less the government interferes, the theory goes, the more naturally harmonious and free society becomes. The ruler facilitates, they don't dictate.
And this really contrasts with, say, Confucianism, which had a much more structured approach, right? Active moral guidance from the ruler, clear hierarchies to maintain order.
Precisely. Confucianism was about building the ideal society through human effort, defined roles, moral cultivation. Taoism looked at a lot of that human-made order and saw it as artificial, counter to the Tao's natural flow, and ultimately a source of conflict because it denied our inherent nature. It's a profoundly less interventionist philosophy, trusting the universe's innate harmony more than human plans.
That raises a huge question for today. What if less governance, less control, actually did lead to more harmony and freedom, not the chaos we assume? It definitely challenges a lot of modern political debate, which is usually about how much intervention, not whether intervention itself might sometimes be the problem. A really provocative alternative. Okay, so we've covered the origins, the core ideas, the key teachings. But this wisdom didn't just stay in books. It had a massive, lasting impact on Chinese culture, and its influence continues today. Let's look at that legacy, starting with maybe its most obvious contribution, its view of nature.
Nature isn't just important in Taoism, it's absolutely central, foundational. Our sources emphasize that harmony with nature isn't just a nice idea, it's considered a fundamental law of existence, how one should live, how one understands reality.
So not just appreciating a nice view, but aligning your whole life with nature's rhythms and processes. Humans aren't superior masters, but part of the flow, needing to understand and live according to its ways.
Exactly, and that applies both externally, seasons, rivers, growth, decay, and internally to our own innate nature, our instincts. Laozi draws this vital parallel. Just as the natural world works by its own spontaneous order, human society falls into chaos when it resists those natural laws and tries to impose artificial ones. Forcing nature or our own nature creates imbalance.
This really positions Taoism as an incredibly early environmental philosophy, doesn't it? It's non-anthropocentric. Humans aren't the center of everything, just one part of a bigger interconnected system.
It absolutely does. Our sources explicitly point this out: Taoism as an early nature-centered environmental ethic. Ideas like conservation, preserving natural rhythms, minimizing human impact, these are core tenets. It predates modern environmentalism by millennia, but speaks so directly to our current climate and sustainability crises. Its wisdom feels almost prophetic right now.
Incredible foresight. What lessons can a 2,500-year-old philosophy offer us about our relationship with the planet today? It really feels like Taoism was championing ecological balance way before we even had the word ecology, a profound counter to endless growth and exploitation.
Profoundly relevant. And this whole naturalistic, non-interventionist vibe also shaped Taoism's unique political and social vision.
Right, again, remembering the backdrop of warring states. This wasn't just abstract dreaming, it was a proposed radical solution to very real violence caused by overly ambitious rulers.
Exactly. Taoism's administrative philosophy grew directly out of criticizing those oppressive, centralized policies that were fueling conflict. It offered an alternative vision for a more peaceful society based on entirely different principles.
So summing up that alternative governance again, invisible ruler, minimal interference, respecting people's natural needs, avoiding complex laws and harsh punishments.
And promoting simplicity and modesty in leadership and society overall. It's a vision where harmony isn't forced by control, but emerges naturally when you allow the inherent order of things, including human nature, to function. It was, and still is, a radical departure from most political thinking, which tends towards more control, more rules, more power.
It offers a serious alternative to many modern ideologies, particularly those pushing for more state control. Does this less controlling approach genuinely lead to a more harmonious society? Or is it a beautiful ideal that's hard to implement in complex modern states? It definitely makes you question some basic assumptions about how societies work best.
And Taoism's influence didn't stop at philosophy or politics. It seeped into almost every part of Chinese culture and kept evolving over centuries, showing how deep philosophical ideas can have very real, practical impacts.
Philosophy rarely stays still. How did Taoism change after Laozi? Did it stay purely philosophical?
Well, our sources mention it was deepened by later thinkers like Zhuangzi. He explored the more mystical side, individual freedom, often using these brilliant, witty stories and allegories. He added layers of spiritual insight. But then, interestingly, during the Han Dynasty, Taoism also evolved into a full-blown religion. It started incorporating popular beliefs, deities, rituals.
Ah, so it branched out. From a philosophy to also having gods, temples, rituals, even practices aimed at achieving immortality, I think. A distinct spiritual path alongside the philosophical one.
Precisely. It absorbed local deities, developed temple worship, intricate rituals, and yes, the quest for immortality, both spiritual and sometimes even physical, became a big part of religious Taoism. This dual nature, philosophical and religious, helped it weave itself deeply into the fabric of Chinese society at all levels.
And its cultural reach is just immense. It seems to touch everything from art to medicine to martial arts.
Absolutely. Its ideas about naturalness, balance, spontaneity.
Sure.
Huge influence on Chinese painting and poetry, think landscape paintings. The flow of calligraphy. Traditional Chinese medicine, with its focus on balancing yin and yang, the flow of qi, vital energy. Seeing the body as a mini-universe connected to nature that's fundamentally Taoist in its understanding. Even martial arts like Tai Chi, using softness against hardness, flowing with an opponent's energy. Or Feng Shui, arranging spaces harmoniously with natural energy flows. All deeply rooted in Taoist principles.
It really drives home how philosophy isn't just abstract ideas in old books. It's a living force that shapes culture, how people think, create, heal, even move for thousands of years. From governing styles to the brushstroke, Taoism left this incredibly rich, multifaceted legacy. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, let's quickly recap the incredible journey through Taoism and Laozi's wisdom. We've talked about the Tao, that indefinable, universal way. We've unpacked Wu Wei not in action, but that powerful idea of effortless action flowing with nature. And we've seen how crucial naturalness, humility, simplicity, and harmony with nature are, both the world around us and our own inner nature.
And despite being ancient, Laozi and Taoism offer this incredibly unique perspective on timeless questions about life and existence. The teachings give such valuable insights into modern challenges, ethical, ecological, like finding balance in our frantic world or rethinking our impact on the planet. The solutions Taoism offers are often counterintuitive, but they really resonate, asking us to question our assumptions about power, control, effectiveness.
Totally. It makes you reconsider what strength even means, or what effective action looks like, or what a good life really is. And maybe, just maybe, what if the greatest strength for us personally and for our societies isn't enforcing things, isn't struggling upstream, but in that subtle, profound art of letting go, of flowing with the way things are?
What wisdom could we unlock, individually and together, if we really embrace that power found in softness, the clarity found in simplicity, the effectiveness of acting in sync with the natural flow instead of constantly fighting against it? That's definitely something to reflect on as you go about your day.